Hello, everybody, and welcome back into our trade deadline recap show. We've had reaction videos throughout this whole week. We are finally at the end of trade deadline, but a lot didn't happen on the day. I mean, we had a lot of minor moves, but we'll talk a bit about that. But I've got three writers from the Hockey Writers here. I'm sure you've seen them on a bunch of different shows. And I've got Kristy Flannery, covers the New Jersey Devils, Mariah Stark, covers the Minnesota Wild, and then, of course, Jim Parsons, Edmonton Oilers, news and rumors and all that stuff as well. Thanks for joining the panel, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, everybody.
All right. Well, let's get right into this. We'll start with the Minnesota Wild because they were the busiest team on deadline day of all the teams. I mean, they actually made I'd say not major, but major-ish moves. So, Mariah, let's start there and start with John Klingberg, who, a lot of people thought he may have gone earlier. I know the Oilers were in on him at one point, I think, but went to the Minnesota Wild. First we'll start with Klingberg. What do you think about that addition to the Wild defense?
I just have to say, oh my goodness, I wasn't expecting today at all. I was like, oh my God. I am really happy with Klingberg. I think it's great. The Wild's defense has been doing better lately, but something was off. They needed something to kind of kick. I actually just saw a tweet that I purposely screenshotted and probably can't find now for this, but that kind of summed up exactly what I was thinking. Basically, it was he's got offensive potential. It could quarterback the power play, which could mean Calen Addison is bye-bye, but I'm kind of okay with that. And the quote was, "We're serious about winning." So, I mean, they're taking this means they have 8 defensemen, which kind of puts Goligoski in a hard spot, and Addison, but Addison's been kind of up and down anyway, and they needed this, especially if Dumba's going to be gone this summer. If they can re-sign Klingberg, that would be huge for their defense. And he has more points than Greenway and Dumba put together. So I'm happy about that.
All right. Well, Klingberg wasn't the only move they made. They also acquired Oscar Sundqvist from the Detroit Red Wings, who was also a very busy team in the leading up to the deadline. What do you think about Sundqvist coming in? And then just as an extension, they traded away Jordan Greenway. Sundqvist is basically, I would say, probably replacing him. Yeah. So what do you think about that swap?
That's kind of what they said too. He's going to be their replacement. I'm excited. I feel terrible because I was a big fan of Greenway, but I think it's really good for him. He needed a change. He was kind of stuck. He was starting to find his way the last few games, but he's had so many injury issues, and I think a fresh start is exactly what he needs. And I mean, can you get a more offensive team than the Sabres? I mean, there are a few. I should rephrase that, but I think he's finding a good spot, and I hope they treat him well because he's a good person.
Yeah, and Sundqvist is a good bottom 6 guy. He was really good in Detroit, and he'll probably do a really good job in that role for Minnesota. They also added Gustav Nyquist, not on deadline day, but a couple days ago. I believe it was a couple days. Yeah. What do you think about that? I know he's having injury problems this season. I don't know how much of a role he'll play, but he's still an offensive catalyst as well. And he's he's also has a Detroit connection. He played for Detroit a while ago too.
I've heard good things. I'm not as familiar with him, but I have heard good things. And they also got Johansson back. So it's been
there you go.
Crazy. And the only thing I would be nervous about is injuries, but Guerin's really excited. And typically he doesn't go all in on a player unless he believes in them. So I'm excited to see what happens. Just hopefully he can come back when they expect him to, because it would be good to have him for playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, there was an expectation that he could come back before the playoffs, so we'll see if he does. But yeah, Minnesota made quite a few moves when they were just being that third party broker before,
just like hello,
all these other moves. But Guerin had a plan, so they've added quite a bit. Kristy, Jim, do you have any thoughts of what Minnesota did? Has it shifted power in the Central? I mean, they were a pretty good team before, but have this kind of changed anything?
Go for it, Kristy, if you got one.
Okay. I watched John Klingberg with the Ducks, and I felt like he was a very interesting player because I think when free agency opened up, a lot of people thought Klingberg would be the first player to sign a contract.
Mm.
And then I watched him on the Ducks and I kind of realized why he ended up having to take a 1-year deal. I think there are some holes in his game. Also, the Ducks defense is not the strongest defensive core in the league. So I'm curious to see how he's going to play in Minnesota, because he played so well in Dallas, had really struggled in Anaheim, and now we're in a different location with a different system, different players around him. So I'm curious what John Klingberg, the Minnesota Wild, are going to get.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the Klingberg one is interesting because I'm not sure if it gives Minnesota enough to put them as somewhat of a favorite or really cement them into this playoff race. But at the same time, I think Klingberg could be kind of an underrated addition here. They got him for super cheap. Yeah. Actually, most of what Minnesota did wasn't very costly. And so I had my eyes on Klingberg for the Oilers. Now, they didn't really have, and as Matthew said, dating all the way back to last offseason when it was like a rumor that maybe Montreal was going to get him, then flip him to Edmonton. I still think Klingberg might be on the Oilers' radar in the summer, depending on what Evan Bouchard does. So I think that's a player that we're probably going to watch closely here in Edmonton, but he could be interesting in Edmonton or in Minnesota because there's a much heavier, importance or priority placed on the defense in Minnesota, and in Anaheim, they didn't play it at all. So when you have a guy like Klingberg, who isn't known as a defensive defenseman, that's not the best formula. I was really surprised that one took so long to get done. Like literally after the deadline ended, that trade came through. So that nobody was really all that interested, and that Minnesota kind of got him for a song was kind of a shocker to me. So we'll see what it looks like for him in the offseason, because I wonder if he's going to struggle to find a home.
Yeah, well, it did take a while for him to even sign that free agent contract too, and everyone thought he was probably one of the first defense off the board, but he ended up being one of the last. So, and then he signed that really short deal, and then of course gets traded. So we'll see what he does in Minnesota. I think he could be a real good addition to that defense, like you both said there. So we'll see. I think Sundqvist is going to be very under the radar type move as well, because I think he was probably one of Detroit's better bottom six guys. So we'll see how all that plays out. All right, well, let's move to Kristy and the New Jersey Devils, who made probably the biggest forward move because Timo Meier is an RFA, and he's going to be in the future of the New Jersey Devils rather than just a rental. So let's start with Timo Meier. What does he bring to the New Jersey Devils? Especially, they're already a strong team right now.
Let's talk about this, Matthew. I have been in Timo Meier land for, I don't even know, was it like 4 days, 5 days that he's been on the team? He brings so much to this top six. I think the one thing when you looked at the Devils is the top six, especially, they don't have size. Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, not the biggest guys in the world. So adding just his body, his size, the fact that he's not afraid to go into the dirty areas to get the puck, he's that net front presence that the team needs. He checks off so many boxes for Tom Fitzgerald and the New Jersey Devils. And it's so funny because the biggest, I guess, like thing right now with fans on Twitter is he going to play with Nico? Is he going to play with Jack? And I'm like, it's a win-win, guys. Familiarity with Nico Hischier playing at the international stage, and then the dynamic of Jack Hughes and Timo Meier on one line. That is an opposing goaltender's nightmare. And then you're going to add in the speed of Jesper Bratt. Stop it.
Yeah, Meier's gonna be huge for the Devils, like you said. I really liked, like, they seem to be the front runner for a long time, but he kind of got shifted between different teams, and obviously a lot of teams wanted him, but the Devils ultimately got him, and we'll see what he does with. Like you said, it doesn't really matter what centerman he plays with.
It's so dumb. It's so dumb that there is actually a line that could potentially put together of Jesper Bratt, Jack Hughes, and Timo Meier. And props and stick taps to Tom Fitzgerald, because Dawson Mercer is still a New Jersey Devil. Yes.
Oh, that's for sure. When they were talking about him being in there, I'd be like, don't do it. If that's going to be the cost, don't do it. I love Dawson Mercer. He's probably one of my favorites out of the draft. He was one of my favorites. So
golden retriever energy for sure.
Yeah. Oh, he's like I said, he's one of my favorite forwards to watch. So yeah, great that he's still in New Jersey. All right. Well, before we get thoughts of Mariah and Jim here, they did make another move on deadline day, very underrated in my opinion, because I've watched this guy all season. Curtis Lazar getting acquired by the Devils, and not for a big price, 4th round pick. So what do you think about Lazar being added to the Devils?
So I think he's interesting. And I even wrote in a recent article that the team's BMW line, if you're not familiar with New Jersey, that is Miles Wood, Nathan Bastian, and Michael McLeod. When they're at their best, they are one of the best 4th liners in the league. But they've lacked consistency this season. And there was an injury with Bastian that kind of threw things off. And Bastian saw himself scratched for a couple of games. So when I looked at that line, and then the fact that Zetterlund went to San Jose for Meier, and he was on the 3rd line with Andre Palat and Eric Halla, I thought that Fitzgerald was going to go for a depth forward, because Boquist has been doing a very respectable job. Boquist has deserved to be in the lineup for New Jersey. Sharon Govich, he's always been kind of a streaky player, and he's been recently playing with Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt. So obviously Timo Meier is going to go into that spot. So Curtis Lazar is very interesting, because at this point you're looking at, is Yegor Sharangovich and Jesper Boquist now just going to be out of the lineup as depth pieces? Because I think a 3rd line of Eric Halla, Andre Palat, and Curtis Lazar, like that is your shutdown line for the playoffs. It's veterans, it's physical play. Like that to me is a chef's kiss, perfect 3rd line for the playoffs.
Yeah, and we all know what Tampa Bay, how they won cups, is a 3rd line that could do, like you said. So, and I really think like maybe it's a bit too high saying Lazar's like a poor man's Anthony Cirelli, but that type of player where, they just do everything. And I know Lazar's not the biggest scorer, but he can put the puck in the net. So, but his biggest thing is physicality and winning faceoffs, blocking shots, which is what you need in the playoffs. So I'd say great addition for New Jersey. I'm sad that the Canucks lost him, because they did sign him to a 3-year deal, but the Canucks aren't going to be in the playoffs for probably a couple more seasons. So he probably wouldn't even be playing where he should be and be most effective. So, well,
thank you very much for your forward. I really liked him during his media availability. Somebody asked about his playing style, and he said, no, not a lot of creativity, just meat and potatoes hockey. I said, that's my kind of man there.
Exactly that. That's exactly what he does. So he's reinvented himself from what he was a 1st round pick.
Yes.
I mean, now
he's talked about that.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing. I mean, guys that are in 1st rounders and adjust their game when they figure out that they can't do what they did in junior, and he's done it for sure. So, all right, Mariah, Jim, have any thoughts about what New Jersey has done on deadline week and of course today?
Go ahead, Mariah, if you got one.
I don't have a lot, but I was gonna say, Kristy, I like your Halla comments. We miss him here, or at least I do.
Halla got a lot of the fans' anger, I guess, is the polite way to put it. He's had a hard time with the fan base. The fan base hasn't really been that accepting of him, because he played on a line with Jack, and people just lost their minds over it. I see the value in Eric Halla. He's a very competitive guy, and I think people underestimate how important he is to that locker room.
100%. I didn't know exactly where Timo Meier was going to end up. I just knew there was a hole, and I knew we weren't going to get him. I was like, nope, we're not. So when I saw New Jersey, I was like, okay, like, let's add more superstar talent to this roster. And that's about all I have to say on it.
Yeah, I like what New Jersey did, and what I really like about their look going forward. Like, you've got the Rangers, you've got the Bruins, you've got the Lightning, you've got all these teams that really added in the East, but New Jersey did so with long-term future in mind, right? Like, Meier's going to be there. I have no doubt he's going to sign an extension in New Jersey. Like, I know the qualifying offer, $10 million, is a scary thing, but I think that'll get done. Like, I know they didn't talk about it prior to, but I know that this is probably something that they're going to figure out in short order as soon as the season's over. But they've also got the ability to keep the players that they've got. They didn't get Patrick Kane or Tarasenko, who are probably both going to leave the Rangers. They didn't add Bertuzzi and Hathaway, who are probably both going to leave the Bruins. Like, they didn't get these pieces with the expectation that this is the only run they're going to have. And so I think New Jersey's got these bodies in there knowing they're going to be good for a while. And I think that's really important for them.
Well, I think it's something to note too, is that the teams that you mentioned, the Rangers, Boston, Tampa, their windows are all on the way down.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
The Devils window is on its way up, and like
Mm.
it's not the same. And that's why I keep telling Devils fans, I'm like, stop comparing the Devils and Rangers this year, because they're in two totally different places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's completely different.
Yeah, and Meier fits really well in that respect, right?
He does.
Yeah.
He really does.
Oh, like I said, it fit really well. Like that's why when New Jersey was in that, the top target or the top expected team to get him, I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. And then Vegas was obviously being in there too for some reason, but
Vegas is in everything. So is Toronto. The only other team that I thought even could remotely look at this was Carolina, but I didn't feel like they were ever going to pull the trigger on it.
yeah.
I always thought it was New Jersey.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And exactly what happened. So it's going to be exciting to see what he can do in the playoffs. And, for the rest of the time that he's going to be there long term. I think he's going to sign a long-term contract. There's no problem with that. So it's going to be exciting to see what he can do. All right. Well, Jim, let's shift to the Oilers and talk. I know, you guys talked at length about Matthew Zator on Oilers Overtime, but anyone's watching this show, I mean, the Oilers were very quiet up to now. I mean, they weren't doing much. Then they acquire Ekholm, and then they acquire Nick Bjugstad for the bottom six. What do you think of their moves? And do you think Holland should have done more to kind of push this team for a Stanley Cup?
It's interesting how the narrative will change about a general manager within a matter of a few days, right? Like you get into the deadline and everybody's mad at Ken Holland because he hasn't really done anything. Now, he did most of his moves in the offseason. Like he spent all the way up to his max on LTIR because he needed to do so to take advantage of the cap flexibility that comes with that. So he tried to make his team as good as he could make it in the summertime, knowing that come deadline time, if he was going to do anything, it was money in, money out. So he didn't do anything, and people were getting all mad about it. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, Ken Holland doesn't know what to do at the deadline, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes and he pulls out Ekholm in a trade, and then he gets Nick Bjugstad in a trade, both of whom I think are perfect fits for what the Oilers absolutely needed, right? Now, do you lose Tyson Barrie to Nashville and that's not the best thing? Yeah, I think it's kind of sucks that you had to give up Tyson Barrie to do this, because I really do like Tyson Barrie. That said, I don't think we're looking at Tyson Barrie the way that we look at him today. If Evan Bouchard had stepped up earlier and kind of taken that place of Tyson Barrie, which is what everybody thought was going to happen after the season Bouchard had last year, right? So had Bouchard stepped forward now and earlier, moving Barrie isn't a big deal. But it's kind of a big deal now because Bouchard hasn't stepped up. That said, the Oilers are so much better defensively than they were just 72 hours ago with Ekholm on the roster. And he really wants to be here. Like if you had listened to his interviews and he talked about his wife being from Sweden and being used to the really cold winters, and his kids are super excited to come and he's house shopping already. Like they just really wanted to come. And he's very excited about the idea of being with the Oilers and having a potential run for the next few seasons, which is what he's got on his deal. He's expensive, but he's a solid addition and probably an investment well made. Like he's going to be worth every penny of that $6 million. And then when you really look at it, and I'll probably use this again later for another segment we're doing up in the show, but when you figure out the cap gymnastics that Ken Holland had to do to make these two trades possible, because he had like no money at all, and he ends this with $0, by the way, $0 on the cap. Like he has none left. He gets Bjugstad as part of the deal because Nashville retained 4% of that contract, which is the strangest number that you would ever think of, but he did it intentionally. Like he had them retain that because he knew Bjugstad was in the back pocket and he could make that work. So I think Holland went from being a guy that everybody was like, oh my gosh, what is he doing, to, oh, that was pretty cool. Could he have done more? Yeah, but you have to move people off the roster to do it, right?
Yeah.
So the questions about, do you trade Kyler Yamamoto, or do you trade Warren Fogle? Do you trade Cody Ceci? Those are all questions he would have had to answer. I don't know if it would have been the right move or not. So I'm really happy with what he did. I think the Oilers are a better team. Losing Tyson Barrie sucks, but I think it was a move in the positive net direction. So I think it was a good move by Holland.
Well, I really like I've said, I don't know how many years, probably 5 years or more. I've said the Oilers aren't going anywhere until they address their defense. And I think this is the first one that I'm going to say that this is the first time they've actually addressed the defense by not just adding an offense. Like I like Tyson Barrie, but he's all offense. Like he's just, I don't feel he's the best defensively. While you look at a guy like Ekholm, he's like that great two-way guy that they need. And he's not a rental. He's on, I believe it's on his first year of his new contract.
Yeah, he's got 3 more years left.
3 more years. So I mean, he's got terms. So that was a great trade. I think they had to give up quite a bit, but that's what you got to do to get a guy like that. So
yeah, this is their window. They needed to take advantage of it. And of all the options that they were looking at, rumored to be looking at, Carlson, Gavrikov, Klingberg, I mean, he's the best fit, right? He was the absolute guy that they needed in this role.
Yeah. We'll start with you, Kristy. Do you have any thoughts on what the Oilers did at the leading up to the deadline, and then on they didn't do anything on deadline day, but
the first thing that I'll say, and I said this before we hit record, so weird to see Ekholm in an Oilers jersey. Weirder than seeing Kane and Tarasenko in a Rangers jersey. Yes, I said what I said. The thing with Mattias Ekholm that I've learned this through like talking with other players that are in the league as well. When you think of Nashville's defense, you think of Roman Josi. That's obviously who you're going to go to. But I don't think a lot of people realize Mattias Ekholm was the defenseman that took on the hard tasks and the hard responsibilities of shutting down like the opposing team's top players. Like Josi didn't have that job. So I think that people undervalued Ekholm a little bit because he was in Josi's shadow to a certain degree to maybe like the casual fan who wasn't fully paying attention. So I love this for the Oilers because the Oilers really needed something, because you don't want to see McDavid and Leon just be wasted and not be in at least the Stanley Cup final or the Western Conference final. It's just not good for the sport. You can't have Connor McDavid do what he does in the regular season and then get eliminated in the first round. So I think solid move by the Oilers.
Sure. Mariah, anything to add to that?
Well, she took Ekholm, so I'll take Bjugstad.
There you go.
There you go.
I love this for Bjugstad, especially since he went to Arizona and that was kind of the rumored place for contracts to die. He had said he thanked the GM for giving him a chance to find his game after it kind of disappeared for a little bit. He was good for us, but obviously we had to move on because we were going in a different direction. But I like this for him, that he gets to be on a team that's super competitive and gets to show kind of what I mean, he's a big guy. He adds a little physicality too. And just overall, another great player that I'm a huge fan of because he's from here. But
yeah, and he's another guy that's kind of reinvented himself too, because he was a big time, offensive type guy coming into the league. So he's in a pretty good bottom six. Like you said, has size. He's I believe he can play center as well.
Yep.
If he is a centerman. So I mean that's good, and that's very versatile bottom six guy for the Oilers.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a knock, I guess, on his face-off and penalty killing numbers. But like we talked about with Klingberg, when you put him in Arizona, it's hard to know what those numbers are actually accurate, right? Like, I don't mean to knock Arizona, but it's just not the best
reality.
team. So some players, their numbers might be skewed by the teams that they're playing on. So if you put him in a different role with the Oilers and you don't ask him to do certain things that he was being asked to do in Arizona, and he does, and he still can score. He's got 13 goals already in the season. So he's got the ability to be moved and used in sheltered roles that are going to accentuate his strengths. So I think that could be a real win. And to get him at the cost they got him, I mean, he's $400,000 to them, right?
Very small. Yeah. And there's another guy that could potentially be under the radar move that makes a big difference in the playoffs. So a very, very good move for the Oilers for sure. And I would say with the same thing with Lazar, he very good penalty killer, but the Canucks are 32nd in the league in penalty kill. That's not a reflection on Lazar's penalty killing ability. So, for sure. All right. Well, now we've gone through the teams that you guys cover. Let's pick some winners and losers of this deadline. Not on the day, because not really a lot happened, but the deadline week, that was insane. I'd say the most insane week I've seen in a long time in the NHL. So we'll start with you, Jim. Who's the winner of this, or a couple winners and then a loser, or even a couple losers of this deadline?
Well, for my winners, I'll probably go with the Bruins. I think that they're a team that was already the runaway favorites. I don't know what the actual record is, but how quickly they got to 100 points. I mean, they're the favorite. Everybody knows they're the favorite. They're going to be the team to beat this year, and they got better. So they added pieces that are like definition Bruin players, right? Bertuzzi, Hathaway, like they're absolutely the mold of the Boston Bruins. So I want to say that they're a winner. What it means long-term, I don't know, but the idea that they're going for the run right now with Bergeron and Krejci and those players in that window to do what they can do and take advantage of. I didn't think they'd be this good at the start of the
No.
season, but they're so good that when you get better and you're already that good, that means you're going for it. And I thought that was a smart move on their part. As for me, the losers, I would say the Penguins are in there. I don't know what they are. I have no clue what they're doing. The additions they made don't put them anywhere farther than really where they were in the East. They certainly don't get them in this conversation of the top teams in the division or the conference. So I don't know why they did what they did. It's just, I don't know. They're just sort of spinning their reels in Pittsburgh. And the Flyers not moving James Van Riemsdyk was a shocker for me. I don't know how they weren't able to pull that out. And I guess Chuck Fletcher said he didn't have a serious offer till like 1:40 p.m. Eastern. And even then there was contingent on other things happening. And we all heard it was Detroit, but they weren't really able to do much. Like Philadelphia just couldn't sell. And I think it just goes to speak to the types of players that they have on that team, that there's just not players anybody really wants. And so that's a real loser for me. I think Philadelphia didn't do very well today.
No, Philly was very quiet. I mean, I thought they would be,
they should have been the busiest team selling today.
Yeah.
And they didn't do like anything.
Yeah. Well, they definitely should have at least made a couple moves, but didn't do much, or not much. They didn't do anything. All right, Mariah, any winners, losers of this deadline week?
Kristy, you're going to love what I'm going to say. New Jersey. And I would say New York. I mean, getting Tarasenko and Kane, if they stay, if they don't, but I mean, come on. That's kind of huge.
Their top 9 is scary.
Yeah.
I've seen some of the lineups. I'm just like, I'm kind of glad. I think we're already done playing them.
Yeah. Yeah, they're a scary team, even though, like, Patrick Kane is still putting up points. It doesn't matter if he's getting older, but that's a scary lineup.
And
We'll see what they can
all
do.
of a sudden just went like on a rampage when he started with them. I think I thought he had like a bunch of goals right away, but
yeah, Tarasenko scored a few already, I think. All right, Kristy, what do you think? A winner, loser, anyone in this deadline week?
I'm going to say winner. I know it's biased, but you got to give Fitzgerald credit where credit's due. The fact that he did what he did and he still has Mercer and Holt on his roster, just well done. I do agree with Jim. I think the Pittsburgh Penguins, especially considering they're in the first wild card spot, a little weird, a little odd of what they're doing. And I always say this. I think when you look at the Florida Panthers last year, they did too much, and I think it backfired on them. So with that being said, I'm interested in seeing how the Rangers and the Maple Leafs actually do. Like, did they do too much to really mess with the chemistry of the team because they went all in? And as far as the Rangers go, offensively, it's just insane what they are. But they didn't address their issue, which is defense. So when I look at them, I'm like, okay, they can put up 7 goals. How many goals are they going to give up? That's my question with the New York Rangers, because Shesterkin's not playing to the level that he played last year. And we all know he was a huge reason why they got as far as they did in the postseason. So the Rangers in Toronto potentially could be losers just based on the fact that they did too much and they screwed up the chemistry in the locker room.
Yeah, I was kind of worried with that with Boston because of how well they're doing without those guys.
Boston's a whole different category.
But the thing is, they added guys that fit that system really well. So that's very true, and it'd probably be fine. But yeah, the Rangers adding 2 guys that are, stars, and we'll see how they fit in. Tarasenko looks like he has. We'll see how Kane does. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. For me, I think the Canucks are a bit of a loser because they couldn't move Brock Besser. They couldn't move. Apparently, they were trying to get JT Miller. There was an offer, but it wasn't. It was, see what it is. Apparently the offer was just draft picks. And Alvin says, no, we're not rebuilding. So we're not trading him for draft picks. I'm like,
well, I even heard that he denied there even being an offer.
That there is. Yeah. There's rumors that there was, that the draft picks, they were just for draft picks. I don't know how true that is, but yeah, we'll see. I think the Canucks are an interesting team. I don't know where they're thinking they are. I mean, they trade for Hronek at an interesting time, but like I said on the reaction, I like the trade as the player coming back, but the picks going the other way, I don't like. So,
well, and supposedly didn't Besser want out? Wasn't there something that he said he wants to be traded somewhat?
Well, I think there's a mutual decision that
Yeah.
they both like to part ways there.
Yeah.
I was all of a sudden Minnesota was in there like at the last second. I'm like, realistically, I knew it more than likely wasn't going to happen, but I was like, come on, please.
I think that, yeah, Canucks said that they never received an offer on JT Miller. That was 2 hours ago. I saw that tweet.
Yeah. There was talk about that they did get an offer. It was only for draft picks, and it was from a reputable source, but
yeah, I heard it was Pittsburgh
so.
making the offer. Ron Hextall was a little bit panicky, but yeah, Alvin's denied it. So who knows what's true?
Who knows what it was, but we'll see. I mean, they may do some moves in the offseason, but didn't make much. I mean, they did add Hronek as looked like a buying move, but
I'll tell you, the one thing about Vancouver that I don't feel like I get out of Pittsburgh is Vancouver, right or wrong, thinks they're going to be better. Like they've kept these pieces thinking that these are either down seasons for them or they're going to be able to retool on the fly and improve what they're doing. I don't think they're right, but at the same time, they aren't just like, they know what they want to do, which is why they didn't move these pieces. They could have moved Miller. They could have moved Besser. They could have moved these pieces and they chose not to. So that tells me, and they added Hronek and they didn't have to do that. They didn't need to flip the Horvat pick. So, but they did. So I think they think they're going to be better. And I think they believe that they're going to improve over the summer and be more competitive. So at least they know what they think they are.
Yeah, that's true, I guess. We'll see if they are what they think they are.
That's right. Yeah. No matter whether or not they're right.
So I'm hoping
confidence.
It's good to have confidence, I guess. But yeah. All right. Well, before we get to our best and worst trades, I want to ask this question because this is always something that happens with these moves. There's always the big moves, we all know, but there's little moves like the Curtis Lazar move, like the Nemesnikov going to Winnipeg. Those smaller pieces make a big difference. So, Jim, we'll start with you. Is there any trades that you can kind of pinpoint that could potentially be massive once the playoffs end? You point to it and it's like, wow, that move was a really good one, even though we didn't give it a lot of headlines when it did happen.
Well, there's 3 moves I really like, 2 that I think will have playoff implications. I already mentioned the retention on the Ekholm salary that allowed them to get Nick Bjugstad, and I think that was really smart. It's still an expensive contract, but I think it was a really good move by Edmonton to do that because when we all saw it happen, we didn't know why. And then all of a sudden it started to make sense when they got Bjugstad, right? Yeah. I like that one. I like Jacob Vrana to the St. Louis Blues. I don't know that that's going to have any real impact this season, but he's the type of player, if he figures out his personal issues and his health and all that stuff, they got him at a half retained salary for the next 2 years, and they're trying to retool. Talk about a team that doesn't want to rebuild. He could be really good for them. Like he's got one of the best scoring per 60 stats in the league over the last few seasons. So when he's on, he's really good. And so I think he could do something for St. Louis. The other one I liked that I think was small and kind of flew under the radar, even though it was really dramatic, was I think the Jonathan Quick trade from Columbus to Vegas. I don't know what Quick is going to do. I'm not sure if he's going to be as good as he was last season for the LA Kings, if he'll do that in Vegas, but Vegas needed goaltending. Columbus was really cool to flip him when he didn't want to go there, and they didn't have to do that. And I think he's pissed. I think he's legitimately motivated to shove it down Los Angeles's throat. And I believe these two teams could face each other in the first round. And if that happens, he's going to make them regret that they did that. Like Quick's the kind of guy, you don't make him mad, because when he's mad, he's really good. So I do wonder if that was it's going to come back to backfire in the Kings, because I don't really like what they did. I don't think the Gavrikov and Korpisalo move and moving Quick out was the smartest play. I think they motivated Quick to shove it down their throats.
Especially now that he's in Vegas, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, Kristy, what do you got? You got any small trades that you kind of think may become big, even though they're not right now?
I do agree with Jim. I think Jonathan Quick is I think that he landed back in the LA Kings division is just hilarious. It's not the end of the storyline. I think there's going to be a lot more to go with that. And I guess just because I've been in Devil's World for 4 days, I'm going to go with Curtis Lazar. I think that he provides something that the team didn't have yesterday. And the fact that if that fourth line of McLeod, Bastion, and Wood kind of fall off the rails again, you have an answer. Like, you're not going to be surrounded, like looking into like the AHL, trying to hope that like these kids are ready now for this massive spotlight in the postseason. So I think that is a very smart move that he can be kind of tweaked within the third and fourth line or be a healthy scratch. We'll see what happens, but I think it was a smart move.
Yeah, I'll agree with that one. I was going to pick Lazar as one too, because I really like that move. For anyone that would have got him, it would have been a playoff team anyway. I was actually anticipating him to move, but
yeah,
there you go. All right, Mariah, have you got any small trades that could potentially be big ones?
I was going to say Bjugstad, because when I saw that, I was really excited. I was really happy for him to be going to Edmonton. And I'm also, this one kind of baffles me a little bit. Nino Niederreiter to Winnipeg. I'm just kind of like he's a good player. I feel like he was kind of, I don't know how well he was doing this season, but his style doesn't seem like Winnipeg's, and I'm just kind of curious how he's going to fit in there.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to see how he does. I believe he has 15 goals. He had 15 goals going into Winnipeg. So yeah, he could add something. They did lose, I believe it was Perfetti to injury. So that's why they had to think to make that move. So we'll see how he does. All right. Well, let's get to our end part, a best and worst trade of the week, not of this day, because obviously nothing really happened today. Jim, start with you. A best trade and a worst trade of deadline week, or even just of the season in general so far.
I really liked what Ottawa did to get Jacob Chychrun at the final moments of this whole thing. And I like it because this was the team that we all knew was in on him from the very, very beginning. And Arizona decided that they wanted to sit on this as long as they did. And they sat at the top of their little mountain and said, we're going to wait until we get everything we're possibly going to ask for this guy, and someone's going to give it to us. And no one did.
Yeah.
Ottawa knew it. And they waited and waited. Like, there were a lot of people, granted, that were in on the conversation, the Oilers, whoever else was talking to Arizona about this, but there was really no way that Arizona was realistically going to get the ask that they wanted, which was 2 firsts and the equivalent of another prospect and a player. Like, it just wasn't happening. And so Ottawa knew it, and Ottawa wanted to be better, and they just waited. And I think that it was a really smart decision to get him basically for a top 5 protected and 2 second rounders. And he's got term, so he's not a rental. I think Ottawa was a team that Dorian felt like he really wanted to reward for staying in this thing, even though they were ravaged by injuries and were having a hard time. He wants them to feel like they're a team that is no longer rebuilding or retooling. They're going for it. They added a piece that's going to be with him for a little while. He wants to be there. I think he just saw a picture of him eating lunch with his grandfather today. He lives in Ottawa. Like, it was a good fit, and it made sense from the very beginning, and they just waited. And I thought that was a really smart move. And having said that, on the other token, I think Arizona was idiotic for waiting so long and asking for such a high price and sitting him out for how many weeks did the guy not play? Like, it was crazy. I think they just totally misplayed their hand on this one.
For sure. And that's why they didn't get what they were asking. And they ended up being a very underwhelming return, I think.
And I do wonder if San Jose is going to pay for that with Erik Karlsson too. Right? Yeah. Not getting rid of him when they could have sold him at his highest value, I think might come back to bite them.
For sure. All right, Mariah, you got a best and a worst trade.
So I have a couple bests and one worst. I was going to say Tarasenko to the Rangers, just because I really liked watching him when he was with the Blues. But then once he wanted out and everything, just kind of, his game kind of just, yeah. And then now he's with all of this offensive power, and it's just ridiculous to see his talents kind of come out again. So that one, I would say New York definitely did. I don't know if I don't know his contract situation. I've been so overwhelmed today by the Wild that my brain is just gone. So I was like, if he resigns or if he stays, whatever his contract situation is, I think he was a good fit there. And then I was going to also say kind of what Jim said about Quick going to Vegas.
Yeah.
Like, Vegas they kind of fixed their goal if they can. Oh, like I said, my brain. They have a good goaltending situation there, because he's got a heck of a chip on his shoulder, and that's where my worst is going to come in, is that LA doing that to him.
Yeah.
When I read that, I'm like, oh, this is a joke, right? I read it like at midnight when it first came, and I'm like, no. And then I read it the next day, I'm like, they seriously did that to him? Like, really? And I felt bad for Columbus, because they were just kind of in the middle of all that. And it's like, how do you feel being the team that I don't want to play for you.
Yeah.
I didn't want to come here. So they were nice enough to do. I mean, they did a good thing for him, but I just felt bad for them being in the middle of all that. So yeah, that would be my best and worst.
Yeah, that one really surprised me too. That, trading a guy that basically is a franchise icon. He's probably one of the
won cups for you.
Won cups, the best goaltender, one of the best. I don't know. He may even be the best goaltender in their history. So yeah, it was an interesting chain of events.
In the last few months of a 10-year deal, right after a game ends, he has to fly home with the team. Like you couldn't have waited till the morning. Like, really? It's just the drama around that one is crazy.
For sure. All right, Kristy, finish it off with you. A best and a worst trade.
I'm going to be honest. I'm going to go completely off the board here because I think it's really hard to grade a trade or rate a trade right after it's done. And the reason I say that is I look at like Tanner Jeannot. Like everyone thought that they way overpaid for a player like Tanner Jeannot. But what if he is the missing piece for that team? And that's the player that helps propel you to win a Stanley Cup. Then you look back and you're like, actually, it was worth it. So I don't really have one right now. I want to just wait and see how it plays out because you don't know what players are really going to like struggle in a new system or who's going to do really well. Because from what I've been told by players is it takes like 10 to 20 games for a player to really feel comfortable in a new system. And that at the end of that 20, like we're going to be in the postseason. So some players might have a real hard time, like a Patrick Kane or, a Timo Meier. They might really struggle with their new system. So I think that you have to just wait and see. That's going to be my ridiculous answer to this question.
Think about how Toronto's feeling right now.
Yeah.
you don't know. You really could do.
Well, and look at what Keefe has said after they added those players. He said it was all the old guys that should be doing better that have been stinking up the joint since the new guys joined them. All the new guys have to figure it out, and the old guys are kind of like, well, this is how we've always done it. They changed over like a quarter of their roster.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said about that. And I think Fitzgerald just told us a couple hours ago with his media availability, he goes, I'm not really a big fan of mixing and kind of like screwing up the dynamic at the trade deadline right when the postseason's right around the corner. So I think that's a question for once everything is all said and done.
No, it's fair. It's fair. Like I say, a lot of these, like that's why I asked that smaller trades that don't seem like anything right now, they end up being really big because you don't know until they get into the system and fit in. And some players play better in the playoffs too. So
look at the Avalanche. Look at the small moves they made last year. Paid off dividends for them. So it doesn't need to be the big name that's going to make the big deal. That's going to make the big, it's not. I'm not speaking in full sentence, but that's just not how it works.
No, it's true. It's true. So it's going to be interesting to watch how all these guys fit in and over the rest of the season and into the playoffs, but it's going to be fun. No more trades until the draft.
Well, technically, yes, but you just can't play. I don't know who's going to play.
You can make trades, but
you just don't get to use the guys.
Guys, we need a break from trades. So we're done.
For the most part, and there won't be. There usually isn't trades because of that fact. But and trade deadline's over, and this is what you got. So we'll see how the teams figure stuff out, and it's gonna be fun to do. But thanks, Kristy. Thanks, Mariah and Jim, for coming on the show and talking recap. We had our reaction videos all throughout this week. Didn't have any today because there weren't any big, massive trades. That's why we had this recap. So. Make sure to check out thehockeywriters.com for all the analysis of any of these trades. Obviously, all the teams will probably be doing different grading, grading the trades and all that stuff. So make sure you're checking out, of course, Mariah, Jim's, and Kristy's articles as we go because they're all playoff teams. So there's going to be a lot more coverage coming up, and or I would assume they're all going to be playoff teams. I know New Jersey and Edmonton for sure. Minnesota's kind of.
You saw my eyebrow raise.
Minnesota's in the middle there, so
they're in the mix. They're in the mix.
We're getting up there.
They're in there. I think the addition is going to make a big difference. So there you go. And obviously, my Canucks are not going to make the playoffs. So I'm just going to be waiting for the draft lottery, and for the last few years. So. Make sure to check out all the articles and the YouTube channel as we're going to have different videos, no more trade deadline stuff, but the draft is coming. So we're going to have a bunch of draft coverage. That's starting right this weekend. There's going to be some draft profiles coming out. So keep an eye on that. and make sure you're checking out all the articles and the YouTube channel. And we'll see you next time on another video on our YouTube channel here.